Hi, everybody. Welcome along to episode 85 of Percussion Discussion. As always, I'm going to ask, please check out our social media. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and of course, our world famous YouTube channel where you can hear and see all of our conversations, past and present. If you wouldn't mind subscribing to that, that really helps. So I'd be very grateful if you could. It only takes a second. If you'd rather listen on the go, then all of our conversations are available in podcast form. You can find these from Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all of your usual podcast providers. So if that's your thing, you know what to do. And please leave us a review if you can. It only takes a second once again. Thanks very much. On to today's guest now. There's a name that continually crops up during our conversations, and that name is Ringo Starr. So I was very lucky at the UK Drum Show. I ran into a gentleman who is the authority on Ringo and all of Ringo's equipment that he's used during the Beatles' career. He's the curator and the historian for Ringo Starr and all of his drum kits that were used during that period. And he's a very, very nice guy. And he knows everything there is to know about Ringo and his equipment. And he's a good friend of Ringo's also. It gives me great pleasure to welcome the fabulous Mr. Gary Astridge.
It's nice to see you, Manny.
Oh, well, I was very lucky to catch you at the UK Drum Show, the first one in Liverpool, and it was really fascinating. And before we get into it, I must thank our mutual friend Terry McCusker for the introduction. He introduced us to each other, and now Terry is one of the authors of this fine book. Now, I know you endorse this book as well, Gary, don't you? It's a really good, it's a great book to have, and any Beatles fan, any Ringo fan should own a copy, and I know I do, and I love this. So there we go. So thank you, Terry. Now then, Gary, where did the fascination begin with Ringo Starr and the Beatles?
For me, it goes to the U.S., right? And it was like millions of other drummers say of my age. It's like seeing them on the Ed Sullivan Show. I mean, for me, I was 7, and just a little boy, never had any ideas about music. I never heard of the Beatles. I was just like, riding my bike and just doing things a 7-year-old would. But when they appeared, that there definitely was some magic in the air, because it changed my life, and for whatever reason, I just dialed in on Ringo. So
that's a powerful thing, isn't it? It changed your life. 5 minutes on a Sunday evening. I think it was a Sunday evening, wasn't it? And that's isn't that an incredible thing to be able to say? And this. I've done, I think you'll be number 84 when this eventually comes out, possibly somewhere around there. And 90% of the people I interview, they mention that that's the key moment. I should say drummers of a certain age, and I don't mean any disrespect by that, but the ones that were old enough to remember it. And I have to ask a question about this. Would the Beatles have been that big in America without that TV show, do you think? I've often wondered it, because I appreciate how huge the show was as well.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's a good question, because I don't really know all of what was going on. I never really focused on the entertainment that was available that week, but I just know that society was so much different. There was a time, we're on a Sunday evening, 8:00. It would be parents with their families, their children, just watching so-called wholesome entertainment.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, it was just. I think it probably wouldn't have happened unless it was the Ed Sullivan Show. But isn't that part of all of the Beatles' magic of if this little thing didn't happen, that wouldn't have happened. But they just had some guiding hand that just saw them through to make them what they landed up being.
Absolutely. And I mean, just to give us an idea, obviously over here in the UK, we've had entertainment and variety shows. Just how big was the Ed Sullivan Show? Was it something that every family sat down to watch? That was the show, I guess, at the time.
Yeah, it was the show, and I guess they broke records of the number of Americans that watched it that evening. I don't know what a normal amount of viewership would be, but it was reported that they had over 73 million people. I don't even know what the U.S. population was at the time, but I mean, it's even today that would be a huge number.
It's hard to imagine that many people watching anything at one time.
Yeah.
In this day and age, it's just it really does beg a belief. And was it heavily advertised that the Beatles were going to be on it? Because obviously it was a different time, and I'm guessing you probably, like us, had 3 or 4 TV channels at the time.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Once again, I'm too young to know the details, but from things that I've read and learned, and people that I've talked to, was that New York City had a huge population, and they had some of their disc jockeys that were just all over this, just playing the songs over and over and over, and just the excitement of the songs. They were so new and fresh and different sounding,
Yeah.
that when you heard them, it was just like, what is it? And when you saw them on television, once again, they just looked so cool with the Beatle boots, the suits, the hair. I mean, everything was just so different than what anyone was used to seeing here in the U.S. That they were just the whole package of just something unique.
Yeah, that's the thing that I was going to say. The whole package, which even not that anybody would admit this, if you weren't so keen on the music, they looked cool, and that would automatically make you think, well, they look cool, they must be cool, they must sound cool. It's a whole mental thing as well, isn't it? And it's certainly a key moment. And I don't how I mean, obviously, I don't know much of the history of the Beatles pre that. You don't hear much about that. But how big were they in the UK at the point when when the Ed Sullivan Show hit?
Yeah, they were quite big.
Mm.
And what's interesting, Maddie, is with doing a lot of research on Ringo's drum kits, that led to learning a lot more about them.
Mm.
But what fascinated me is that these guys were hungry. They were really hungry, and they were extremely talented. They got along, which I think was a big part of keeping the band together, because they truly loved each other as people. But they did not stop working. I mean, if you go to there's certain websites out there where you could see or at least try to put together their schedule of playing. It was like night after night. When they would play at the Cavern, they would have it set up where they would do an afternoon show. Things would stay set up. They would do the evening show, and then they would be off somewhere else and come back to the Cavern and do a couple afternoons and evenings in a row, and then hit the road. So, but it was nonstop, never having a day off. And every time you saw them play, I mean, they loved it. I mean, they're playing, like a song like Long Toss Sally, how many hundreds of times. But when you see them play it, with the evidence that we have from the videos and things available, they're always just, highly charged, singing it like it's the first time, having a blast. It's amazing.
Do you know what? It says a lot about their voices holding up with that kind of punishment, because the stuff that they were doing wasn't easy vocally, was it? Let's be honest,
Yeah, I know. Could you imagine? I mean, because I even know with bands that I'm in and the one I'm currently in, many elite singers, if you said, hey, why don't we start with Long Toss Sally as an example? I say, no, I blow my voice out for the whole evening. We got to sing that to the end of the show. But they just dove right in. They were just ready for anything. It's amazing.
Incredible. I mean, let's talk about yourself for a minute, rather than Ringo. I mean, obviously Ringo had a huge influence on you. Was he? Was he your reason for picking up drumsticks?
Yeah, he was. He truly was. And he's the only guy I focused on. I shut out all the other bands. I knew about Charlie Watts and Keith Moon, but for me it was like all I cared about was him and what he did. And I mean, almost to the point of obsession.
Did you try and emulate the way he played, or?
Yeah, and that's a good word to use, because with all the years of playing songs, I think that myself and even good drummers, you can come real close, but you can just emulate him. There's no way you can nail Ringo. It's just so unique. And I have a little something here to mention, and I mention this often. Having the relationship that I have, where say during when Ringo's on tour and they're doing a sound check, I've had the occasion where I'm literally standing right behind the riser, just a few feet from him, and I remember the first time where you're just seeing him, and it's like, all right, he's playing with his heel up, and you're just watching how he's working the hats, or we're playing the cymbals, and where he's hitting them, what part of the sticks he uses, all those little details. And it was like, wow, who gets this? I'm going like, this is so awesome. And next to him at this one particular evening was Greg Bissonnette, who's a phenomenal drummer. He's like
Greg's been on the show, yeah.
Okay, and he's just as nice as he is talented. He's a wonderful human being. So Greg, as they're playing, he keeps looking back at me, sticking out his tongue, and just having a blast. And after they were over doing the sound check, like, Greg, hey, I got to ask you something serious. I go, Ringo's got that it factor. I go, I know I'm not a starstruck person, and I go, but there's just something. And then he goes, Gareth, I hear it every night when we're out here playing. And he goes, it's unbelievable, but it's true. He's got that. And you know how sometimes you could have guitarists as an example. You could take a guitar perfectly tuned, have three guitarists that all know this a particular song, and ask each one of them to play it. And you might have that one guy where everyone's just going to look and say, "Whoa, what was that?" It just sounds, and it's that X factor, it factor, whatever you want to call it. And I think not only Ringo, but I think they all had it.
Yeah, it's in these, isn't it? It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
There's no.
And
there's no mystery to it. I don't think it's just that person. That's what they do, and they're the ones who can do it. And that's my view.
Yeah. And it's interesting with Ringo, because when you watch him play, he doesn't hold the sticks, hard. They're just kind of loose, and he's just hands, wrist, and fingers. When he plays. And even when you see the early shows where he's using his hi-hat, just the way he would do that. Going back and forth, but it just gave that consistency, and when you listen to the early Beatle records, especially some of the live ones, you can dial in on his hi-hats because they have a certain tonal quality that adds to the wash, and it's so unique because that tone becomes part of their song and their trademark. It's just like, as soon as you hear it, you just say, that's Ringo. It's got to be the Beatles. I just hear it.
No, you're absolutely right with everything you say there. And it's one of those where he has influenced so many people. Just everybody. I don't know anybody who goes, no, he's not really affected me. Even the younger guys, they listen back, and the way he plays a song, he doesn't tread on toes of the singer, or he's out the way.
His hi-hat sound early on just absolutely fascinated me. And I know when I was first trying to dial in on cymbals, it was like, what did Ringo use? And then all I kept hearing was, it was either 14 or 15-inch hi-hats, a 20-inch crash ride, an 18-inch crash ride, and there was Zildjian. And so I'm taking that as gospel. And then every time I buy a pair of hi-hats, it's like, okay, what do they have to be? Thicker, thinner, paper thin. And I'm going like, I can't get that sound. I go, how do you get that sound? And there's no answer. But I did learn that he used all kinds of cymbals.
Right.
So through his career, it wasn't just what I had mentioned. It was way more than that.
Well, is Ringo? Is he a geek, a drum geek like most of us, or does he just want his sound and not bothered how he gets it?
Yeah, what when people say he's not technical, they're right. But then again, the reality is even take it to any of the others, and let's just use like Paul McCartney
Mm.
as an example, who's just like so gifted, so off the charts. Um, None of them are technical, and I say that because when you look at the Get Back documentary, so
Mm.
now you're looking at the Beatles when at the tail end of their career, and you're thinking, okay, George Martin, extremely astute, we write charts, no problem, like, and look what he's done as far as adding orchestration. And you think that the Beatles would have picked up things from him, but it seems like he had to learn to adjust to understand them.
Yeah.
Because when you hear them talking, it's like you're hearing this wonderful creativity, and you hear, hey, no, you got to move that bit, or yeah, you know what I'm talking about, do this, and they would just like do it and go like, how basic, how but that's how they were, and that's how Ringo is, um, with his drums. It's not like what he loves Ludwig,
Yeah.
and and then, oh, by the way, he's never had an endorsement deal with Ludwig. He just loved them,
Really.
so he left a lot of money on the table, over all these decades. But he just knows what he wants to hear,
Mm.
and I could spend a long time just talking about things that I learned from him, that firsthand, that are just it was just uh, unbelievable. Every time I talk to him without asking specific questions, he just gives me gold nuggets, and it's like, wow, you don't realize what you just said, and how important it is.
Wow, just incredible. I mean,
And now I'm sure, Maddie, I bet you right now a lot of people are listening or watching this saying like, say what it is. What did he say? But it was just way too much to share in a podcast.
it's just, you have an incredible job. You really do, and it is your job. You're the historian and curator for Ringo Starr, which is what a hell of a title. If you'd have thought back all those years ago when you first heard them, I'm going to be working with this guy and I'm going to look after all
Yeah.
his drums. It's up there with I'm going to be an astronaut when I grow up, isn't it? It
Oh
really.
yeah, yeah. The odds of this happening to anyone,
Mm.
it's just like it's off the charts, because the Beatles are very, as individuals, they're very controlled. Their inner circle is very small,
Yeah.
and with the story of what happened to me, it was just like, how does this happen? And what's interesting? I mentioned this to Terry McCusker yesterday. Uh, when you're in Liverpool, I mean, as an outsider, even though I've been here, I think 7 or 8 times, the Beatles drive the economy here
Mm.
in this city, and you can't turn a corner, or go into a store or a restaurant without seeing something
Of course.
or hearing something relating to the Beatles.
Yeah.
And when I was here for the UK drum show, and then being on Matthew Street, the Cavern, and things like that, and out and about, you just see thousands of people, and they're all just taking pictures of anything, hanging on to any little bit of information they get from a bus driver, doing a tour. And I'm thinking like, wow, nobody knows who I am, and look what I'm doing with one of the Beatles. It's just like I should really, be on my knees every night. But the whole process just came about so normal
Mm.
for me, that it was just like, I can't believe I'm doing this. But yet this is just it is, and I'm blessed and very respectful. It's just, I know it's like a who gets this, it's hard to believe.
Well, you've done your homework over a number of years, haven't you? You've put your life and you've put everything into it. Your life and soul has gone into it, hasn't it? Into this
Oh
research.
yeah, for sure.
And
Yeah.
you do good things, it pays off. I'm a strong believer in that, and it's paid off. You've got a good friend in Ringo Starr. You've got a great job.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you're a very giving person as well. The seminars, I guess you'd call them
Mm.
seminars at the UK Drum Show, were terrific. Unfortunately, I only had the time to catch one, but it was, and it's nice that you give back as well. So that's my way of thinking anyway.
Oh yeah, and even with Ringo, it's like with the things I do, I always, because he wants for nothing, so it's like, what do you do for the guy, So it's just like, okay, well, I'll put forth effort, and I'll make sure that the Lotus Foundation, which means a lot to him and Barbara,
Yeah.
um, gets something back, for things that I do, because I would never be doing this without his blessing,
Yeah.
and it's uh yeah, it's just a wonderful experience. And the one thing I would like to say over and over and over, it's amazing because through the almost 10 years of me doing what I'm doing for him, at the beginning, it was, the inner circle people saying, Gary, you're part of the family now. But they're all in Los Angeles and I'm on the other side of the country in Buffalo. I'm just thinking they're being nice. They're just saying nice things, and I'm just going to slowly fade off into the sunset. But that never happened. It was always like, hey, we got a project for you, or come out here, we want you to look at this. So it just kept going. And what happened was I would see Ringo and I would just say hi, and then I'd be surprised having a conversation in my head going like, I'm not starstruck. I didn't get up and act stupid or say anything that would be, out of line. And then, but just over time, we started to develop a friendship, and Ringo's just said some very nice things. But when I documented the 5 of 6 Beatle kits that he used during his career with the Beatles,
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time on him, and I knew him, and he'd be asking questions, and I would tell him, things, and I did big write-ups on his drum kits, and I says, well, here, this is all part of archiving, so you might want to have this, but he obviously took the time and read everything.
Yeah.
And then there was a magical moment. I was with him in Toronto, and he came up to me and we started talking. And then he just said words to this effect. He just said, because of your research, he goes, I learned things that I didn't know. And you brought back fond memories of things that I had forgotten.
Wow.
And it was very emotional, and it was very, very powerful.
Yeah.
And we talked for a while, and then he left, and then that's when people came up to me and they just said, Garrett, he never comes in to talk to anybody before a show. He never spends that kind of time. He even touched you. He never touches anybody. He's just elbow bumps and things like that. He goes, he likes you. And then, but it was like ever since then, it's just every time I see him, it's just his arms are out, and it's just give me a hug, brother. It's just and when I'm with him, I'm rambling here, but when I'm
Oh
with
no,
him,
not at all. Not at all.
because I know so much about him, just as we all do if you're a big Beatles fan. For me, it's like I'm with my uncle. Just somebody that you love and you care a lot about and you know a lot about, and you would do anything for just to make him happy. So that's pretty much the relationship. Yeah, it's amazing.
Incredible. It's stuff of fairy tales, isn't it? It really is,
It is. Yeah, it's like a Beatles fairy tale for fans. And it really is. And then to be involved with his gear, I remember, I took a video of myself to have it, and I'm glad I did because it shows well when I do talks. But there was a lot of background work before I worked on his first kits, and it's a whole other story. But to get to the point, I was working with his drum tech, Ringo's drum tech, Jeff Jonas, who's a
Yes.
beautiful guy, and we disassemble the Ed Sullivan drum kit, and did a little cleaning, check things out, and then put it back together. And as I'm doing it, everything is normal because I spent decades collecting this, oyster black pearl drum kits, and they had that moment where it's just me and Jeff in this secured room, and I just looked and go like, wait a minute, this is the drum kit that changed my life, and I got it apart and it's in my hands, and I just started crying, and then I got a little embarrassed because I didn't know Jeff that well at the time, and he just said, Garrett, it's okay, he goes, it's okay, and it was just like, wow, I can't believe that I'm doing this.
That was
Yeah.
one of the things. I don't really write questions down. I write just single words that might, jog my memory. But one thing I wrote down was how did it feel when you first literally touched the holy grail, as it were, you know, and you've answered that, and an emotional time.
Oh yeah, and you know what's interesting, Eddie, is that I set up now two of his drum kits. So over time, at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, and I just set up about a month ago now, I think, his maple kit.
Right. Okay.
And that was a unique experience too, because once again, it's just like I know the job, I know what you got to do, and but when I did it, I think it was in 2016 or something. I set up one of his Oyster Black Pro kits, and I did it, and I had two assistants from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that then, once I had it set up, they put the plexiglass up, the security, and then adjusted the lights and the security cameras. But then the next morning, I was invited back to get like a personal tour, and we finished just as the doors were opening for people to come in. So word was out in advertisements that the drum kit was on display. So I just thought, God, I'm going to go back there where the kid is. I'm just going to stand off to the side. Nobody knows me, and I just want to see what kind of reaction. And in comes like four guys, obviously in a band, and the drummer he just goes up to the front of the drum kit. He just puts his hand on the plexiglass, and then I couldn't tell if he was crying or not. But then he backs up, drops to his knees, just starts bowing to the drum kit, and I'm like, whoa, what a start! And then other people would come up and just look at it, and then they'd be crying, and then in my head I'm thinking, you have no idea what it's like to actually have a relationship with this drum kit, which are now priceless artifacts, historical artifacts, without a security plexiglass in front of you. So so all I keep saying is I'm blessed, but I am. Yeah.
Wow. What does Ringo make of this worship? I can't use any other word apart from worship, really, because he's obviously aware of it, right? I suppose.
Oh yeah, I mean, not only with his drum kits, and then a little side note with that, based on what I was saying before, not now that they're all back together, because everything was in disarray and disrepair. He was so happy, to know like that they're not only together, but even when they're set up to if when he sits behind him, it would be like, yeah, this is how I sat, this is how my cymbals were, so he appreciates that. But he's very, very good. All the Beatles are very, very good with handling their fame. I mean, and he knows. I mean, you see him on tour with with the guys he tours with. They idolize him. I'm sitting there, and you're hearing the stories of people that I wouldn't name. Trying to get word backstage, like, "Hey, so and so's here, and he'd like to get a few minutes with you." So it's like, wow, but Ringo has a way of just making you feel comfortable. He's very funny, very sharp witted, and every time I was around him, he just has a way of neutralizing everyone, but yet that reverence just is always there, and that's the coolest part for me, just to see really, really, really famous people just treat him with such respect.
And the thing is, he'll always be a Scouser wherever he is in the world. He'll
Oh
always
yeah, and
he'll always have that wit.
he is so funny. Yeah, he's his humor is so quick. I mean, this is a small story, but in the collection of drums that I had when I was collecting and researching, I actually had a gold-plated snare drum made, a Ludwig super sensitive, and it was from '64, and it matched the gold-plated snare drum that he was given by Ludwig in September of '64.
Well,
So, and Ringo still has
Bill
it.
the Third was on the show actually, and he relayed that story, which was quite nice.
Oh,
So that was quite cool.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens is Ringo was playing close by to my home. So Jeff, his drum tech, called and he said, "Hey, Greg Bissonnette says he's never seen your gold-plated snare drum." He goes, "Would it be an inconvenience for you to bring it out?" I go, "No, I'll bring it." I go, "That's fine." So I have it in a secure case, and I had like white gloves and stuff so the gold doesn't get fingerprints and things on it. So I get there, Ringo happens to be in the room with the the whole all-star band at the time. And I think it was like Gary Wright and people like that. So drum comes out of the case, and there's like a skylight, and it's just the snare drum is just like glittering, and everybody's looking and you're like, oh, it's amazing. And then Ringo's just sitting there with his glasses on, and he's just like staring at the top of a table. And Greg walks over to him, with gloves on, and just says, "Hey, Ringo, look at this." And then Ringo doesn't even look; he's just like just zoning out. And then he says, "This is a gold snare drum, identical to yours." And he goes, "Gary had it made," or something to that effect. And Ringo just kind of looks at it, and then just stares at the table again. And everybody now is looking at him like waiting for a response. So then I just said, "So what, Ringo, what do you think?" And then he just like he looks at me, he lowers his glass a little bit, and he goes, "Mine's worth more." And then he just, everybody laughed, and that was it. But it was just the quick humor. Nobody ever expected anything like that, but very funny.
Oh, just
Yeah.
incredible. I mean, let's talk about the equipment for a minute. Now, obviously, and we know he was a premier player for I guess for 12, 18 months or something, and he had the mahogany Duraplast. Now, when I know Ludwig caught his eye, was it? Because I'm a big Premier fan, and I know there are lots of guys in the UK Premier fans. Do you think there was a huge jump up in quality from Premier to Ludwig?
No, I don't. Actually, I
Yeah.
think that it was just the sound
Yeah.
was different,
Mm.
and uh, even with that, with having a Premier kit,
Mm.
I mean, you could definitely hear the difference,
Yeah.
but there's so much there. And I think, because Ringo makes a comment at one point where he says, he had a Premier kit, and he goes, and it was, English, and it was heavy.
Mm.
And we're like, why would you say it's heavy? But I know he had like the cast,
Yes.
the rims and things like that. But then part of me was thinking, okay, was he saying it was heavy because that would have been, he had it early enough in his career where that would have been one of the kits that he had to
Yes. Of
carry around.
course. Of course.
It wasn't Mel Evans or Neil Aspinall doing the grunt work, right?
Yeah.
So
Of course. Of course.
maybe that's why he said it. But yeah, it's interesting.
That was used on. Was it used on Please Please Me? The Premier.
Yeah, actually, like the first marathon recording that they did at EMI. Yeah, it was all those songs.
Yeah, because I
Like
think
Anna Chains.
I think the chains really shows the drum sound off on that, and I think it's a great track anyway, and I love the drum sound on it. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I've tried to compare sounds, and it's quite hard without hearing them isolated. It's quite hard to hear that.
Yeah, especially the early stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, the price of the mahogany Duraplast drums has rocketed in the last few years, and I can only attribute it to Ringo having used them. I don't know what else has. It can't be anything else. I don't think.
This is a little selfish, but I know that when I first started doing talks and things and podcasts, I was very conscious of thinking, you know what, I'm going to be telling the truth about certain things that Ringo used, and I'm shooting myself in the head because it's going to be harder and harder for me to find these same things, because people are going like, wow, I didn't know that. I think I'll
Yeah.
hang on to this, or people are just raising prices. But yeah, because I know like the Royal Ace, the Piccolos, I mean, they're really, really, really hard to find.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I mean, I have a 14x4. It's not the wrap; it's just the chrome finish, the chrome over brass. And I got mine for quite a reasonable price, and it's a lovely drum. It's a great drum, I have to say. But I am a Premier fan, so I'm a little bit biased. I have Ludwig snares as well, but
yeah, no, but premieres are great. And then the other thing too is I asked Ringo, we are talking about his premiere kit,
hmm,
and I says, "Hey, I'm pretty sure I know the answer." I says, "But what type of heads did you use?" And then, he said calfskin.
hmm,
So it was just nice to get even just that. I mean, firsthand, right from him.
yeah, absolutely.
So, but there you go. Yeah.
Oh, that must have been a fun time trying to tune calfskin heads every night, and especially with
Can you
a
imagine?
no, no,
No. Yeah, not at all.
especially in some of the hot, sweaty, humid, like the cavern, for example.
Yeah.
We know what calfskin heads do in humidity, and no, it's not for me. Go for the
And
E.
it's interesting with mentioning that uh just trying to think how I condensed this story. But you know how when you watch Ringo play, especially with his premiere kit,
Hmm.
it would always be like rim shots. He would just have his left hand on his thigh near his knee, and he would do that. One of the things that I learned that he liked is to have, I don't know if you call it rims or hoops. I mean, whatever
Yeah,
term.
either both. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah, but he likes it when they're really drawn down
Hmm.
and not having much space between the top of the rim and the head.
Yeah, sure.
He just told me, he goes, yeah, I like it better that way. I can get the rim shots in.
Hmm.
So part of me was attributing that to him just playing, and then you figure night after night you just keep cranking down, right? Because especially if the heads keep stretching. But it's just those little things where you just kind of put that in the back of your head and go, there's just something right there that I didn't really, even think about. And then he's telling you, something very specific.
Yeah, I mean, it's unusual because Mylar heads were around at that point, weren't they? They weren't.
Yeah,
So I wonder why.
yeah.
Maybe they were just supplied with the drums or
Well,
something.
once again, for him, it could have just been the sound because everything always resorts back to sound. With the conversations I had with him, and so um, he didn't even realize that he used Zin cymbals. Um, there was a whole story behind that too. That's actually funny, but he told me in front of Greg and a group of other people. We were talking about it, and they said, Garrick, so what is Zin? So I said they're premier English made cymbals. And then Ringo just puts his hands on his hips. He goes, well, I've never heard of them. How come we have played them? And then he was, and everybody was looking at me like, what are you doing? You don't disagree, with Ringo. So, but I knew this subject was going to come up, and there's a photo out there that you can find, and it shows Ringo in 1967 in the studio, and he's sitting behind his drum kit, and his 20-inch sizzle is in the photo, and you can clearly see one of the rivets, and then you can see the Zin stamp.
Yeah.
So I brought it with me, and I just said, I go, here's a photo of you with the Zin. So he's looking at it on my phone, and he goes, it's too small, I can't see it. I go, well, if it was on a big TV screen, I go, you would know that it's a Zin.
Yeah.
And so, but it's things like that. He just, it seems like he learns from me and I learn from him. And it's just, it's such an unbelievable conversation when we have them, because I think because he knows me as the drum guy and he knows what I know, that he won't give me like a pat answer that where he would just normally say whatever he normally says, and it's just like right or wrong. Ringo said it, so it's got to be true.
Yeah.
With me, he'll if he doesn't know, he'll either be quiet or he'll ask more questions. And then if I see him in a few months, but one time he just came up to me and I said hi, and then he just said pasty. And I'm like, pasty? What are you talking about? And then it was like, it's a question you asked me last time we were together. I'm going like, I did? I'm going like, oh, I did? Okay, thanks. So it's little things like that.
Oh, it sounds like he had a really simplistic attitude to equipment, almost childlike. Is if it sounds good, then it's good, and I like that. I'll be honest, not bothered about what the make is. If it sounds good, I use it, and
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, and there's so many other interesting things. Is way prior to like the documentary come out, when it did, I had friends that are big Beatles fans are saying, oh my God, Gary, I couldn't even get through the first one. I mean, even look at Ringo, he's just like, he looks bored, just sitting there doing nothing. But Ringo told me something, and he says it, to to a lot of people, and that's that. He goes, what his job when he was in the studio, he jokingly says over and over about, okay, Sergeant Pepper's when I learned to play chess, but he just said, I'm always listening, and he goes, and I'm, he's absorbing how the song's being created, and he's always ready when if it was like, hey, Ringo, we're ready. I mean, he's there and he's prepared.
Yeah.
So it's not like he's like sleeping on a couch, in the back room, and it's just like, okay, so he does take advice and ideas from Paul, and it's I think that's pretty well known. But Ringo will take things and then he makes them his own, and it's interesting because Ringo always played like a minimal kit, and then even when he advanced to the maple kit, he's like, okay, now he's got the extra tom, but what he would do instead of having a lot of drums, it would be, all right, I'm going to tune them to the song, or I'm gonna try doing other things different. Where like early on, if you listen to Help, like as an example, snare drum's really tight and crisp, and then over time everything just starts to get looser and deeper, and then Dead, and he's doing a whole tea towel thing. He's taking the bottom heads off, sticking the mics underneath. I mean, but when you hear the sounds, they just sound so cool. And then when you hear them just through his palette of playing over those Beatle decade, the Beatle decade, it's just like, Ringo. You just hear it and I'm going like, that's him. I don't even you have to hear more than a few hits. I know that's him. It's just who gets that, so.
He's definitely unique, that's for certain. And do you know who influenced him as a player? Has he any name ever given you any names?
Yeah, I'm bad with remembering names, but I know one that he mentions quite often is Cozy Cole, who's
Oh,
a
right.
jazz drummer.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because uh, when found some videos of him on YouTube, um, many times he can play traditional,
Hmm.
but in many of the videos he's just playing matched grip.
Okay.
And then I'm thinking like, okay, I don't know, how Ringo would really have seen him. Would have been in the movie theaters or something, where you would catch him. But then, things are so antiquated, right? I mean, it's just you're getting what you get. But there was even other drummers, and unfortunately, I can't remember her name, but there was a drummer that with Arthur Alexander, they recorded the song Anna, Go With Him. And then
Oh,
that's when you hear that
yeah.
beat, just like you hear like on In My Life, the
Yeah,
very
I vaguely
sparse.
know the song. Yes. Oh
Yeah.
gosh. Oh dear me. I'm gonna have to have a look after it. As soon as we finish, I'm gonna have to
Okay.
go.
All right.
Yeah.
But when you hear it, you know, obviously Ringo took that, used it on that song, but then he also used it like on In My Life, and then there was one or two other songs that were the song titles I'm coming to memory, uh, but I don't really think Ringo knew who he was,
Hmm.
and but he was an influence on Ringo because he took that and made that his own as well.
Just incredible. I mean, one of the most influential players that has ever lived. And I do a lot of these. I most of the interviews I do are to drummers rather than I know you're a drummer, but you know, um, guys who've made a career out of playing and what have you. And it's always Buddy Ritchie. It's always Ringo. It's for some of the slightly younger ones. It's Gadd and Ringo, and
Yeah.
and just incredible that his name constantly, crops up. And February the 9th, 1964. That's that date has been mentioned more times on this show than
Yeah,
and
for sure.
it's just amazing. It really is, and I'm glad he's aware of how everyone feels about about him and his playing and his, and the Beatles, and it's an incredible story, isn't it? It really is.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's absolutely, especially when you think about his early life, his upbringing, being sick. I mean,
Yeah.
being really very poor. I mean, in a tough neighborhood, but he just came out the other end, as a good guy. And there was one other item um, that I found through a friend, and it was Ringo in an interview saying that he took drum lessons for a couple of weeks when he was really young.
Oh,
And then it was like, wow, I never really heard him mentioning that. And in a get together I had Tuesday with Terry McCusker, he had some of his friends there, and of his age, and they start talking about a person in Liverpool that gave drum lessons named Red Carter.
yes, I know
Okay,
that name.
and so they said, what odds are that if you're saying Ringo took lessons, it might have been with him. And I said the only thing I know is that you know Ringo took the first lesson, and it sounds like he was told. I think we're gonna have to go back to the beginning here, so with rudiments and learning how to read, and so I think Ringo went back one more time, and then he just said, I don't need this. You're slowing me down, and I get it, right? I mean, if you're playing and you think you're on your way, and then somebody's telling you, no, come back to the starting line. You're going to say, no, you're going to slow me down. I'm going to keep going this way. So I think that's what the story was, but I got word out to him to find out if in fact it was Red Carter that spent some time with him.
Do you know what? He's kind of done all right without the lessons, hasn't he? To be fair to him.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Whenever I have when people talk about Ringo, and you have that, he's not technical. Part of me takes it personal, and I try to be open minded, but being with him, seeing how he plays, knowing some of the things that I just shared with you,
Hmm.
I found myself at one point thinking, all right, what song in particular, or what whole list of songs that the Beatles have out there where the drumming sucks or could have been done better? It's like, could you name it?
Yeah.
And then that's when you get crickets.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's funny. I teach a lot of drummers, and one in the grade 4 syllabus, "Come Together" is one of the. It's the technical focus, which is the slightly trickier song. And the amount of drummers I teach, you look at it and they say, "Oh, this is really easy. Why is this? Why is this grade 4? Why is and I said, this one, you just try and play it, and they can't they can't make it feel and sound right. And even the plodding, the floor tom and the
Yeah.
verse, it just never sounds right. And I said, that is why this is about the feel. This is about playing a song. And I've had people fail on it when they've played it okay, but it's not had that nice feel. So that is it's an obvious one. I appreciate that, but that's one to
Mhm.
start with. Magic. It's just magic. It really is.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. Did you ever see the video that came out in 2015? Ringo was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as an individual, and then so as part of that, they had a group of drummers get together, and they did like this 3-minute video. Once it was like condensed,
Hmm.
and they were just talking about how Ringo influenced them. And I think if you were on YouTube and if you just Googled, uh, you know. Greatest drummer, Ringo greatest drummer, or something like that, you'll find it. But like Dave Grohl is in it, and Taylor Hawkins, poor guy, huh?
Yes.
And Max Weinberg,
Oh,
um,
right.
yeah, and then Abe Laboriel, and others. I'm missing some names, but I was involved with that shoot. So I brought one of my drum kits to New York City for a good part of it. But it was interesting because every drummer that was interviewed, they took about 45 minutes or and sometimes more just talking about Ringo. And I'm listening, and there's such, every individual was so accomplished. It was like, wow. I mean, you could make a documentary out of just what all these guys said. And it was, I mean, funny, it was entertaining, it was educational and emotional. I mean, all packed into one with every single one of them, and they all idolized Ringo. And I remember when Abe Laboriel was being interviewed, he was asked a question, and I was so absorbed. Um, he answers it, and there was like an obvious follow up, and the place is quiet, and the director just, he gave strict rules, and next thing I know, I'm so into it, I just blurt out a question, and everybody looks at me doing the, but the director says, no, 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 go ahead. So it just added to it. But if you see the video, it's very heartwarming, and it's even going to be more so, I think, in the future, especially with people like Taylor, unexpectedly passing away. But it's great to watch.
Oh, I must check that out. I must do. And there's a couple of more things I'd like to ask. Now, drumheads, not what he used. I've heard a lot of people who've perhaps worked with him, or that there was a great drummer called Rick Schlosser who did double drums with Ringo on a Harry Nilsson song on an album, Flash Harry, and he was saying that he said Ringo's heads were almost concave and black, and he said the assistant producer was sent through to ask which heads he'd like and to change them, and the response was something along the lines of, if it was good enough for Sergeant Pepper, it's good enough for you lot, or something along those lines. And was that true? Did he not change heads too often?
No, every head that I saw on his drum kits, like, they were so old and so beat up. I mean, the stick markings, and I'm analyzing everything, and I was surprised with the pattern, where he was always clustered close to the center.
Yeah.
But they were so dirty. I'm looking at them, I go like, how did he get this dirty? And you would just think, but them chain smoking, right? I mean, ashes going everywhere, beating them into the heads. But I heard, when you talk about being concave, I heard that at one point when he had his Maple kit set up at EMI, another band was in there, and the drummer migrated over to the kit, and I guess he wasn't playing it, but he was just hitting the drums. And I wish I could remember who the guy was, but he had just said that, he goes, "Oh, something's wrong here." He says, because every drum just sounded out of tune. But once again, if they were really loose, and then you throw the tea towels on them, and you're running everything through the system, you're getting the sound that he was looking for. So it's like, doesn't matter what they sound like in real life. It's just like, what's the end product? But that made me laugh, because that's how he is.
That's part of the charm, isn't it? Really,
Yeah.
And when you kind of rescued these kits, almost, I don't know if that's the right word. I think it is the right word, actually.
Yeah, it is for some of them.
Yeah, were the heads on them, or were they?
Yeah, the heads were on, except for like the front bass drum heads, but otherwise everything was intact.
So did you leave those on? The original heads were all on. So
yeah, and it was interesting with his jazz festival. He got that in May of '63, and he used it all the way through majority of the recordings. And when I disassembled that one, it's kind of a funny thing, is I'm with Ringo's personal assistant, a beautiful guy, funny, named Scotty. And so I'm doing the work. He's taking pictures and videos and stuff. So you take the head off, and I said, "Oh my God," I go, "there's so much dirt like in the crevices on the outside and everything." So we carefully just like shook the drum, and we'd tap on the countertop to get everything that was in there, on this big sheet of paper we had. And then, so actually there was quite a bit of dirt and dust, accumulated. So I said to Scotty, I said, "Look at this." I go, "This is accumulated through all the years of the Beatles playing." I go, "So this is magic Beatle dust." And in fact, when we were doing the Star Festival snare drum project, I went out and I bought these little tiny glass containers, or and with a little screw on top. And I wanted to get permission. I says, we'll just take a little bit of this beetle dust and we'll put it in the bottles. I go, and we can add that as an accessory.
Wow.
I go, wouldn't that be cool? And then it was like, you know what, you're getting a little too over the top with this stuff. But we did keep it, and all of the beetle dust is secured.
Lovely.
So,
wouldn't you love to put that through a laboratory and see what's in there? Oh, that's beautiful. So that still exists somewhere. That's incredible.
Oh yeah, it's in a vault with Ringo's drum kits and his Beatles memorabilia.
That is just magical. Oh, dear me. And there's one more thing I'd like to ask, and perhaps I should have finished on the one thing we've just done, but I've often been fascinated with, this is real drum geekery here now, but what did Ringo do with his bass drum, dampening wise? Did he use anything, or because it always sounded a nice healthy sort of trade-off between boom and thump, if you like. There was always a bit of both there.
Yeah. So I mean, early on it was some like the felt strips that you would get, so depends on the how you have it positioned, where, if it was in the center, higher, lower, or on the side going vertical. And sometimes you would have one on the batter head and one on the front bass drum head.
Yeah.
And as they advanced, they took the head off. And then the Beatles actually had made, or a fan made the Beatles a sweater when they were doing, I think, Help, and they were thinking about at that time to call the movie 8 Arms to Hold You.
Oh, right, okay.
So they had so they had this sweater made with like 8 sleeves, built into it. So that was thrown inside the bass drum for a while to muffle it, with the front head off, and then it went from that to blankets.
Right. Okay. Is that jump? Does the jumper still exist with 8 arms?
It's gone to history, as far as I know.
Oh, that's a shame. Gary, again, I can't thank you enough. This has been absolutely fascinating. We know how many Beatles and how many Ringo fans are out there, and I honestly, the fact that you've shared all this information so generously with us, not just me, you've done it, you speak about it publicly and at various festivals and events. So thank you so much. It's very much appreciated. It really is.
You're more than welcome. And there's something that I always say at most of my talks, and it's just that, not to repeat everything I said about the beginning, because I know that this, the odds of this happening to someone is just unmeasurable. But if I hope that when I talk to people, they can maybe lose themselves to take what I'm saying and just kind of slide into being me, to say, oh my God, you just took me for a nice little ride to see what it's like to be him, and to learn a lot about Ringo, his drums, his drumming, and the Beatles.
That's how it is. You've just summed it up beautifully. You really have.
Yeah.
So, look, Gary, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. It really has. And I know you're still over in the UK at the moment, so please have a safe journey back when that happens. And
when that happens,
whenever that happens, we won't say any more about that. So, thanks once again, and hopefully we'll see you back over in the UK soon, and we can do it all again.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Gary.